This is a podcast by WellHouse Church, where we talk about what it's like to be a Christian Monday through Saturday, to live as a person of faith in a culture against faith. All right, let's talk about booze.
Hey, well, that's a good question. Well, that's a different conversation than the one we're having.
I mean, yeah. It was catchy. It was witty. I picked it.
No,
for that reason.
That's fine. It is, but I do want to clarify that that is a different conversation.
It is a different conversation, but specifically, what we're talking about is drinking alcohol as a Christian.
Yep, as you got from the title, because that's what we will call this episode.
Yeah. I have to introduce it some way. I mean, this is the first episode.
You do. I'm not saying you're wrong. Yeah, no, you're good.
But no, so okay, this is a big question. There are a lot of traditions that don't think that drinking alcohol is okay.
There are. We grew up in one.
We did, yeah, in in their own way, yes. That leads us to a really good conversation, right? Because we see alcohol or alcoholic beverages mixed in all through the narrative of Scripture, starting in Genesis 9, right? Yep. As we talked about yesterday on a closer look.
Yep. First story we get seems to be about alcohol with Noah, is that he drinks some wine and he gets drunk. Yeah. And notice, God doesn't condemn him for it. Like, nowhere in that immediate context was Noah's actions of getting drunk condemned, and yet the narrative leads you to believe, just the way that it's written, that Ham's the one at fault. The sober one is the one at fault.
I do think it is important to say, because we see it in other places, right? We're going to talk about this, but I mean, we do see, don't be a drunkard, right?
We do see that.
Don't be an alcoholic.
Yep. Well, and I think that's the deal. When it says don't be a drunkard, we're going to talk about these. But when it says do not be a drunkard, that's a nominative participle.
Yep.
For non-grammar nerds, don't be a habitual drunk.
Yeah.
Would be the most literal translation, because participles have continuous aspect.
Yeah.
And so it's this idea that you are a drunkard. You are a person who constantly finds themselves in this state of being drunk.
Yeah. That ED,
or maybe not constantly, but consistently.
That ED added on the end leads you to believe that this is a consistent act. So it is important to have this conversation, though, because you may see our podcasts or our Pints and Perspectives, right, and start
these liberal buffoons.
Yeah, these liberal Christians drinking alcohol. And, there's a tradition that is actually really close to both of our hearts, that in some ways I feel like we both kind of identify with some of their theology, that don't drink alcohol, actually make their clergy sign something every year saying that they can't, right?
Yeah, that's beginning to go away. I think there are enough people starting to combat that that's probably going to disappear in the next 5 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But at the time of this recording, that is true. A tradition that we are very close to does still have that.
Yeah. And so what does that mean for you as a member of WellHouse, whether you're an actual member or not, or you just listen to the podcasts? We consider you a part of our church family anyways.
Yep.
Which
there are a bunch of you.
There is a bunch of you. So that leads me to believe that there's probably some of you who don't drink, and probably for theological reasons.
Possibly
for theological reasons, right? Some of you, it may be a choice, right? And good on you. Do you, bro? But but we do drink.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty open about it.
Yep. Not scared to say it at all.
No. I mean, you guys have heard me talk about how like one of my hobbies is mixology, right?
Yep.
You've heard us talk about how we like to brew beer.
Yep.
At what level?
I like to make drinks. I don't consider myself a mixologist like homeboy over here. But yeah, I think at every level. Well, actually, you like even some alcohols that I don't like as much. I mean, I'm not a huge wine person.
There's not many. This is going to make me sound really bad.
Yeah.
For me, when it comes to spirits, there's not much that I won't drink, simply because there is an expression of that spirit somewhere that I can find that I will enjoy more than the others.
Yeah, that's probably true. And, well, I don't know. I really don't like absinthe, but
I love it.
Yeah, it's weird.
And absinthe doesn't get you high. It doesn't.
Yeah,
you don't hallucinate. There's actually a whole nother thing on that, and it's not time for this that on this podcast. But
so yeah, let's talk. I mean, this is a good conversation to have. I'm sure, because we grew up in a very conservative tradition that didn't allow drinking alcohol. We now end up being in places where we both drink alcohol openly.
Yeah.
We post about it on social media. We go to bars. I mean, it's not a thing for us.
I went to 3 different bars this last weekend, actually. Just hanging out with friends.
3 bars? Oh. Yeah. We'll have to talk about the bars, because because of COVID, I hadn't been to a bar in a minute.
Oh, dude, let's go.
Well, I hadn't, just because of COVID. Like, I'm scared of the vid.
The way you do it does matter, but you can still go out and be safe.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so let's have this conversation, because we are pretty open about it. And here's what I would say. First and foremost, I think there's a misunderstanding in the world of Christian theology that says if you drink alcohol, you're a liberal Christian. Okay?
Yeah.
Here's what I would say. As I drink alcohol, I think I have a progressive expression of Christian faith.
Doesn't make you a liberal.
But as far as Christian theology as a whole, I am quite conservative. I mean, I'm probably safely considered a moderate, but by and large, I'm nowhere near being a liberal.
I could safely consider myself a moderate. There are some things that I do lean a little bit more liberally on theologically.
That might be true, but even still, if you believe Jesus was a real person,
yeah, like
you're definitely not liberal.
You're probably more moderate.
I mean, true liberal Protestantism doesn't believe that Jesus was a real person.
Yeah.
Miracles are not a thing. Christianity is just about ethics.
It's more deism than it is anything.
Well, it's not even, it's very Paul-Tillich that God is the ground of being. It's spiritual. I mean, it's not a thing. I'm nowhere near that.
Yeah, me either.
Like, now, there are some of you that are super conservative going, those people aren't even Christians. You know, that's another conversation. But to our question about drinking alcohol, if you drink alcohol as a Christian, it does not mean you're a liberal.
No.
Don't absorb that narrative. That's not what that means at all. So, PSA is out of the way.
Yeah.
PSA is not out of the way. I got another one. Okay. Here's what I would say as a caveat to this. While we may believe that we are allowed the freedom to drink alcohol as Christians, if you find yourself dependent upon or in a place of addiction, you're in sin. Because what I would say is it's become an idol. If you're addicted to anything, it's idolatry.
It's taken the place of God. But
it's become your Lord.
That does not make you a bad person.
Nope, not at all.
There's still grace for that. And honestly, find yourself there right now, please
reach out to us.
We can help you.
We want to help you.
We have resources. We have connections. We can help you.
Yep, for sure. So now PSA's out of the way.
Now PSAs are out of the way.
Let's have a fun conversation.
That's right.
Okay.
This is a fun conversation.
I want to do John chapter 2.
Oh, yes.
So here's the deal.
Yes.
If you don't know, John's gospel does some things different. It's not a
synoptic gospel.
Yeah. Hey, look at you. Yeah. It's not a synoptic gospel, meaning that John's not even trying to pretend that he's doing things in any kind of chronological order.
I actually listened to you. I learned things.
I was just shocked because synoptic is not a word that we use,
No,
right?
it's not.
I mean, we use words like synonymous,
Yeah.
but synoptic is not that. It's similar looking, optic, right?
Yeah.
So, anyways, John's not even trying to pretend that he's like not doing something else.
Yeah, no, he just doesn't.
John's just embraces it.
Yeah, he's like, this is my story and this is how I'm going to write it. Like,
Yeah, it's my party on craft. I want to. So, John goes about and he does this big introduction and does that big theological development there, which is really helpful. And then he goes on to Jesus' first miracle. In John's gospel, Jesus has 9, they're called signs. They're not called miracles. They're called signs. And Jesus' first one is interesting. He turns water to wine.
Yep.
Now, we can look at that and go, hey, they're at a wedding, right? Wine is ceremonial, like it's fine.
You can spin that however you want.
Here's what I would say. You don't need 150 gallons of ceremonial wine.
Yeah. Well, and then we also see there that he tells him to save the best for last.
Well, you're telling the rest of the story.
I'm sorry.
Here's the deal. It starts out, and they're in these ceremonial jars.
Yeah.
Or containers, whatever you want to call them.
There are these big, huge things that hold wine.
Yeah, well, they actually
they
hold
hold
water.
water.
Yeah, they hold water.
Turn them to wine. Yeah.
But yeah, so John chapter 2 verse 6. Now standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons.
Yeah, that's
Let's
a
say
lot.
25 times 6, 150 gallons.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of wine. Now, I want to point out 2 things here. Number 1, Jesus gets water jars for purification. And he knows he's making wine.
Mm-hmm.
Why not just get the containers the wine came out of in the first place?
That's a good question.
Wouldn't it seem like the better thing?
Yeah. But no, he wanted to use the ceremonial jars.
Why?
Because it's sacred.
No. Well, I don't know that there's something unique about it being sacred. I think the sacred element of it is because everybody knows you don't put anything in it except water. Jesus wanted everybody to know that it was him. If you just take old wine jugs and you put water over them, there's potential that people just think you got watered down wine.
No.
But if you get it and it's only water that goes in these and you turn it into wine, Jesus wanted them to know it was him.
Yeah.
I think there's something very unique about that.
That is an interesting perspective.
I mean, because there were plenty of other jugs and containers around that he could have turned water to wine in.
Yeah.
But there also would have been excuses about how it happened.
Yeah.
But he put them in ceremonial jars. You don't put anything except water.
Well, and I also think that this is important to talk about too, is that it was at a wedding, right? It was at a social gathering where people gather as friends and family.
Well, an interesting point you make there, Clayton. How long is an ancient Jewish wedding?
Like, it's several days, if not like a week, right?
Yeah,
Something
it's somewhere
like
in between 7 and 10 days, depending on how rich you are.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah. I mean,
it lasts a long time.
You partying
Yeah.
for a wedding. I mean, it's a whole shindig shebang thing.
Yeah.
So anyways, Jesus makes this wine. And there's a whole deal in there. Mary's like frantic coming up. They're going to run out of wine. Like it's the end of the world. Don't miss that piece, that running out of wine is like the end of the world.
Well, because it's shameful.
Well, it is shameful, but why is it shameful? Because wine's a huge part of the culture.
Yeah.
And so Mary runs up to him. They're going to run out of wine. And Jesus is like, woman, what do you want me to do?
Yeah, that's it.
And Mary doesn't really even acknowledge him. She just looks to the servants and goes, do whatever he tells you. She's just like, and gives him the stank eye. Like, boy, better get this right.
Better do it. He's
so
like,
anyways,
yes, mama.
Yeah, and he just starts doing it. Yeah. He starts doing it.
Yes, mama.
So, picking up this story, Jesus turns this water into wine. And here's the piece that I want to point out to you guys. So in verse 7 of chapter 2, it says, Jesus said to them, fill the jars with water, and they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, now draw some out and take it to the chief steward. This would be like the wedding planner.
Yeah.
Like this is head honcho. This is the guy. So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom. So the groom, who would have been responsible for all the necessary things for making sure the wedding goes properly.
No.
He calls him up, this is verse 10, and said to him, everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine, after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now. Verse 11, Jesus did this, the first of his signs. Verse 10's the point that I would call your attention to. I have a friend that reads this story, and when you say John 2, the wedding at Cana, his first response is, oh yeah, where Jesus keeps the party going. It's like, well, wait, that's not really that far off.
Yeah.
Mary comes to Jesus and says, hey, they're going to run out of wine.
It's disgraceful. It's shameful. They're going to be the laughing stock, essentially.
And so Jesus decides to give them some more wine. Yep. And notice, 150 gallons of it.
That's like more than enough. Well, I mean, we don't know
We don't know how many people are there, but
we don't know what day of the feast it is either.
Well, we don't, but we also know that it's in Cana of Galilee. Yeah. Galilee's a region. Cana's a village. Jesus is from Nazareth. Nazareth and Cana are probably pretty similar in size. We don't know this 100% sure. But Galilee, it's this region, this countryside kind of region. And Nazareth, where Jesus is from, only has about 200 people in the village. Mm-hmm. Cana's not a big place. We don't know how far we are in the thing, but we know that he has a chief steward, which would tell him, like, if he didn't have enough wine in the beginning, like, dude, you're in danger of running out of wine. Right. Like, you need to get some more. So, like, I don't think the dude's ill-prepared.
Yeah.
Like, I think they're just having a good time, and they're running through wine quicker than they thought they would.
Yeah.
And so Jesus provides them 150 gallons of wine. And when it's given, and notice, Jesus tells them to take it to the chief steward.
Yeah.
So they go to the chief steward with the wine, and his response to the groom is, hey, most people serve the best wine first, and then after everybody's drunk and don't care what it tastes like anymore, the bad wine.
Yeah.
But you've saved the best for last. It literally says when they're drunk.
Yeah.
Now, I hear your argument. I hear your rebuttal. Not you, Clayton, you listener. We
can literally hear it through the camera.
Right.
We know what you're thinking. We can feel it.
In the most conservative reading, and I'm going to even skip the whole thing that it's unfermented, because I just think that's the biggest line of garbage I ever heard in my life.
It's just genuinely, and this isn't a pejorative. We say this all the time.
It's ignorant.
It's ignorant.
You're just not reading well. You're
or you just don't know your history.
I mean, it literally says when they're drunk.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fermented drink that has alcohol in it. Like, yeah. I'm not even like, come on, let's be better readers than that. So as the truest, most conservative reading you can come up with, Jesus himself may not drink it, but he definitely contributes to potential drunkenness.
Yeah.
And he didn't have to. And on another note, John didn't have to include that story.
No, but he did.
But he did. There's something to it there. On a much more normal a much more normal interpretation, you would see that Jesus is here with his buddies. Mary seems to have some involvement in the wedding.
Yeah.
So it's probably somebody close to them. Jesus probably cutting loose, having a good time too.
Yeah.
Probably knocking a few back. I mean, I see no reason to think that he didn't.
Yeah.
Especially, which we're going to look at next week, where Jesus says, I will not drink again.
Yeah. For sure. I think that in this intro episode, it is important to say that we do need to come back around and address how, or at least how I believe, the church has gotten to it, the place that it has with alcohol, or was, in cultural Christianity and all that, starting in the Prohibition.
Yeah, so we need to do that next week.
Yeah, we need to talk about that.
That's a big one, because that comes out of the social gospel and a lot of things that are going on there.
We really need to talk about that. And so we'll talk about that next week. And if this was triggering for you, I apologize, but I'm assuming if it was triggering for you, you didn't get this far.
That's probably true. I hope it didn't trigger anyone. I hope that we've created a space at WellHouse where we can have genuine conversation that's valuable. But come back next week. We'll tell you the progression of the story through church history and culture and that kind of thing. And then probably at least one more episode, we'll finish up on some biblical passages about drinking alcohol in the Bible.
Yeah, so go crack a beer and think about all this.